So I had this great plan for this week that just all went to pieces because I'm an amateur at technology. I had this video that was good, but it just went on for too long. Like I was pretty happy with it, but it just went on for an hour, and that's too long. That's too long for a video because by the time you get through all the ed puzzling and everything, you're sitting there for like maybe an hour and a half, and it's just I would tune out after an hour and a half of hearing me talk. So uh, I tried to edit it. I tried to take out some chunks, uh, hone it down, and in the process of doing all that, I ruined the whole thing. The video and the audio was not synced anymore, so I would be talking about statuses and roles while the slide was showing stuff about impression management. It was just all off. I had this really cool uh, video where there were different movie clips that showed different strategies for impression management. What Goffman talked about, right? The impression management and how you maintain the impression others people have of you, and that varies depending on the role that you're in. Um, so anyway, I had to scrap the whole video, and now I'm kind of up against the clock because the video should be out by now, and I'm still making it. And so what I've done is called an audible and crammed a few ed puzzle videos all together. I always planned on showing you the one on formal organizations, where Nicole from Crash Course Sociology talks about bureaucracy and the iron law of oligarchy and Taylorism, or what they call scientific management. Um, I think she does a good job with those concepts, and because those are kind of next level sociological concepts that I think are pretty ambitious to include in an introductory level course. So I think she does a great job of breaking that down into a little bite-sized, digestible format. So I always planned on showing you that one, but the other two I was going to take, but it just didn't work out. So we're just kind of we're punting. We're doing the best we can, given the time we have. So we're going to watch three Crash Course Sociology videos, all back to back to back, and make the best of it. She does a great job also with the roles and how our roles and statuses impact our interaction and the way we try to form impressions, and manage those impressions. So honestly, she does a better job of that than I did, and also does it in a way quicker way, right? Without as much rambling and all the uhs and ahs and rights. I say right a lot, right? Anyway, so what we got to do now is I still want to talk a little bit more about institutions because that's important. I've sort of been teasing that. And also it's a building block upon which we are going to build our understanding of a lot of what we talk about in the second half of the semester. So we really need to get a good, strong understanding of what we mean by social institutions and why they matter and why both conflict theory and functionalism are really important for understanding what they are and what they do. So we're going to take some time and do that in this video. And then also I want to talk about what's coming. And we have a midterm coming up in 2 weeks. We got one more week where we're going to talk about norms. We're also going to introduce our next special assignment next week, but it won't be due until after the midterm. But our next special assignment is going to ask you to violate a norm, and we got to kind of monkey with that assignment a little bit because of the pandemic. Usually, would ask you to go out in public and violate some kind of norm, but I think we got to be careful. I got to be careful asking my students to go out and do things in public during a pandemic. So anyway, we'll make some adjustments, but there are norms everywhere, right? The original experiment, or the original what they call breaching experiments, was this Garfinkel, sociologist named Garfinkel, who asked his students to treat their parents or their roommates like they were boarders, like they were just renting a room from strangers, basically. So they were asking permission to go to the bathroom and to eat any food and to borrow things, and they spoke very formally and just to gauge the reactions when you act very abnormally in these mundane situations, and how uncomfortable it made people feel, and he wanted to document that. So we're going to try to recreate something like that, but I want to give you some creative leeway in that. So anyway, we will introduce that assignment next week, but it won't be due until after the midterm, which will be in 2 weeks. So, and then of course next week we will talk about norms and deviance more specifically. So that's why it's a good time to introduce that assignment on violating norms and simple deviance. And then we'll get into the heavier side of deviance when we talk about actual criminal justice after the midterm. All right, that's the plan for the next few weeks. And now let's talk about social institutions. So there are two key aspects of social institutions that we need to remember. One is that they serve some sort of basic need. They help a society meet its basic needs. They help us sustain modern society. There are 5 basic institutions. We'll come back to that. The second key aspect is that they last for generations. They help a society meet its basic needs, but not just for now, not just right at the moment. They last for generations. They help us meet our needs for future generations, for generations to come. Some institutions, like the family, right, are necessary to help ensure that we do have future generations. And then the education system and as well as the religion and even the state, help us ensure that our children are socialized, right, and that they are brought in and they understand the norms of our society and they can operate within modern culture. So those are the key things. Those are the key ideas. That social institutions help a society meet its basic needs, and they last for generations. They help a society meet its basic needs for generations to come. And that's a really important part. The fact that they last for generations is a really important part. Put a pin in that. We'll come back to that. But first, let's dissect this part about the 5 basic institutions. There are lots of other institutions, and each of these have like secondary institutions and hybrid institutions that sort of are a combination of both of them or that dabble in both of them. So let's go, we'll come back to that. Let's go here and let's look at this graphic, which I know kind of looks like a pentagram. Forgive me. They could have set this up a little bit differently, but it gets the point across, right? We've got these 5 basic institutions. They all interact with one another, right? None of these, you can't understand your government or the state without understanding how the economy works, right? And obviously you can't understand the education system because most of the education system, the vast majority of it is funded by the government, right? Our public education system was funded through tax dollars. Tax collection and government go hand in hand. I mean, it's part of the economics of government. The economy influences religion, right? We have to pass the collection plate around, right? Without the collection plate, the churches will collapse. The churches need money to survive, to maintain the structure and to provide services and to do the things they have to do. They have to work within this economic system. The family is influenced by the economy. All right, I'm going to belabor this point. I think we understand that all these arrows mean that all of these things are interrelated. Now, each of these can have secondary institutions. There are secondary institutions of politics or secondary institutions of the state that also that help serve those basic needs or that help the state maintain and meet those basic needs. Same with the economy, right? For instance, the banking system, the wage system, the job market, the labor market, labor value, the stock market. All of these are secondary institutions of the economy The family has secondary institutions like marriage and divorce and monogamy, maybe polygamy, right? Uh, Depending on what country you're in and your culture, right? Um, so there are secondary institutions of each of these. So these aren't like the only institutions, and there also can be sort of hybrid institutions or institutions that arise because of some sort of obligation. So, for instance, there is between economy and family is the need for childcare, right? Paid childcare as an institution arises from the economic need to have either two parents working, or when we have single parent households, or for whatever reason, economic needs drive family members out of the home and away from children for significant portions of the day. Someone has to be there to take care of the children. So ergo, we created a new institution of sort of the child care system. So that's how institutions arise, and they arise to meet these basic needs. So here's a short little list of just some examples, and I hope this makes some sense. So institutions exist to serve some very basic needs in society. All right, so I know I'm relying heavily on some YouTube help this week, but hopefully this is a short little video that will help us make a little bit of sense of it with some better graphic illustrations.
Institutions are essential parts of any society. Think about it. Police stations, schools, hospitals, businesses like Walmart and Trader Joe's are all core parts of a community. In a sense, they impose structure on how individuals behave. For example, if all the laws that exist in our community disappeared, would I still have a normal day? Probably not. People would be speeding down the street, looting my neighborhood coffee shop, and perhaps a stranger would be sleeping on my living room couch. All the things that I'm used to would be completely disrupted. Maybe a more reasonable example is, let's say all the schools had a new rule of no classes on Fridays. Then parents would have to figure out childcare for that day. Institutions and their rules definitively guide what we do. You may be thinking that you don't have a kid and maybe you don't need childcare services, but in general, individuals are reliant on the institutions in their community. But is the reverse true? Do institutions need individuals? In general, they need lots of folks to contribute to allow them to function, but they don't typically need any one random individual. So there's a bit of an imbalance between institutions and individuals, if that makes sense. While they need individuals and are created by groups of individuals, they will continue even after the individual is gone. The concept of institutions may seem like a daunting idea, but try thinking of them as just a form fulfilling a need. Institutions meet the needs of society by filling expected roles and behaviors. For example, in order for a society to continue, it needs people year after year after year. The family institution makes sure that there will be people to carry on the next generation. We know society needs a way to keep people healthy, so you have the medical institution. And society even needs a way to encourage innovation and progress, so you have universities. There are two views of institutions, a conservative view and a progressive view. The conservative view sees institutions as being natural, positive byproducts of human nature. For example, the institution of hospitals forms naturally from the activities of humans and naturally benefits them. The progressive view takes the standpoint that institutions are artificial creations that need to be redesigned if they are to be helpful to humanity. So perhaps you can see businesses as potentially harming society if they aren't reined in. Now, unfortunately, institution is one of those words that has a very different meaning to a sociologist than it does to the average person. We average people might think of just a business or corporation when we hear the word institution. A sociologist, on the other hand, thinks of social structures when they hear the word institution. They think of governments, families, hospitals, schools, the legal system, religion, as well as businesses. Each of those parts of society continues on without regard to any individual. Governments continue even after the people within them turn over. Families continue from one generation to the next. Laws continue on after the people who wrote them are long dead and buried. Hospitals, schools, businesses all continue past the time span of any individual and are not dependent on any one individual either.